May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. Years ago, when one of my sons, Patrick, was a junior in high school, he experienced life as the father of a newborn baby. And no, it wasn't a real living and breathing baby, but it was part of a health class assignment where he was responsible for a very real-looking newborn-sized baby boy, which happened to be a doll. But it was a very sophisticated doll because this doll was programmed with a computer chip. And Patrick's grade for the health class depended on how well he cared for this newborn infant, how responsive he was anytime the baby cried, or how responsive he was when the baby needed to be fed or changed or played with or rocked to sleep. You see, the computer chip recorded and reported his every move. And as it is with real newborns, this assignment was around the clock an assignment. There was no concern as to whether this 16-year-old boy needed a good night's sleep or had mountains of homework to do, or whether he might be scheduled to play in a baseball game that afternoon. Because, in fact, he was scheduled to play in a baseball game that afternoon. So I decided to be a good mother and a doting pretend grandmother, and that I would babysit this baby while he played in the game. But as soon as the game ended, I promptly gave Patrick his baby back. Of course, by this point in the evening, it was dinner time, and Patrick, a 6'5" growing boy, was very hungry. And he reminded me, usually after games, we go out to eat. But before he could make his restaurant suggestion, the look on his face dropped, because he remembered this newborn baby's capacity for crying. So he asked me, "So what are we going to do now?" And as a seasoned mother of 3 boys, I responded in a matter-of-fact way that we would do exactly what every other parent does in that situation when their newborn baby cries. We would take the baby outside if need be and wait till the crying subsided, and then we would return to our plates at the restaurant. Well, he didn't like the uncertainty of this plan, and it filled him with terror. He was hardly a confident 16-year-old new father. So he decided that we would all be better off if we just had a slice of pizza at home. But the question that he asked me stuck with me. He asked, "What now? What do we do now that we have this baby?" And it struck me because, for one, I remember myself asking that very same question when I did have a real live newborn baby, my first child. There was no computer chip and there was no grade resting on my responsiveness to this baby. But after he was born, I remember this impulse that flooded me. What now? What am I going to do with this baby? And I imagine, too, that it's possible that this was the exact same question that Mary and Joseph might have been asking themselves after Jesus' birth. What now? What do we do now that we have this baby? And the beauty of our liturgical calendar, of course, is that we have 12 days. We have 2 Sundays to ponder their lives with this newborn baby, to consider the very real mystery of and our response to God incarnate through Jesus. Now, this is one of the many ways that our church is countercultural during these early days in January. Because while the rest of the commercial world has packed up their Christmas decorations, they've moved on to Valentine's Day, or returned or exchanged gifts that didn't fit or just weren't right, or moved on to those New Year's resolutions or those January diets, we are here still celebrating Christmas, celebrating the incarnation and pondering that jarring new reality for Mary and Joseph, that they now had this completely dependent and vulnerable baby named Jesus, God incarnate, in their arms. Now, for those of you who might not be completely sure about the meaning of the word incarnation, you should know that it's a big $10 word, church word, that we use to describe the scandal, and I choose that word purposefully, the scandal of Christianity, which is, according to Martin Luther, the fact that God became small for us, became completely vulnerable. For example, one colleague and I used to joke that Jesus, this newborn baby, was one swift donkey kick away from not celebrating his first birthday. He was completely vulnerable in their arms. But most importantly, through Jesus, God showed us God's own heart so that our hearts could be won over. You see, God loved us and loves us still so much, way too much, to remain some distant or remote heavenly being. Instead, God became personal as a mother cradling her newborn baby. It was risky, too, as we heard told in today's gospel from Matthew. Danger, like Herod, was lurking at every turn. And it was radical, even scandalous, an act of love, because as you know, and as my son Patrick discovered, infant babies are entirely and completely vulnerable. Infant babies are the ones who get held by people like us. Is there anything more vulnerable than that? So people like us ask, what now? And for Mary and Joseph, initially their answer to what now was fleeing to Egypt. That was a reality in their life because danger was very much a part of the incarnation. Since God not only loved us too much to remain distant and remote, it also meant that God loved us too much to remain hidden. God was not walled off, separated by some deep, wide moat. God was not off on some distant cloud somewhere. Through Jesus, God entered this world. God entered our world. A world of flesh, of human flesh. A world that includes danger and hurt. A world that includes suffering and persecution and pain. And the beauty of this, of course, is that God is inviting us to love and be loved with that same intimacy. That intimacy that comes from the deepest place of our human hearts and minds and bodies. So on this second Sunday of Christmas, this gift of celebrating the 12 days of Christmas, I invite you to carry this image with you. This image of a vulnerable baby and of us asking, what now? Pray with it, ponder it, walk with it. Because even as we move into this season of Epiphany, which is a season of God made manifest in our lives, right now we have to ask ourselves and answer for ourselves what's next. So imagine, what is it like to have and to hold this vulnerable baby, Jesus, in your arms? And in what ways does Jesus depend on you for his life in this world? And most pressing, perhaps, right now, is the question of what now? The season of Epiphany will help us We will hear stories moving forward of Jesus and his disciples as they are living into this question, what now? So stay tuned, starting on Epiphany in a couple of days and in the weeks to come. Stay tuned to those stories. For us now, though, a good place to start to answer that what now question is remembering the final verse of the hymn we just sang. And thanks to Matthew, who reminded us today during his presentation on hymnody that we learn a tremendous amount about our faith through the text of these hymns. So the last verse of that sequence hymn reads, "Now my heart sets none above you. For your grace alone I thirst, knowing well that if I love you, you, O Lord, have loved me first." That's what's next for now. Amen.